Majority Leader, Senator Respicio, for
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that we adopt the session agenda dated August 3rd, 2011. There's nothing on the agenda right now, but when we get down to motions, this is where I would make all the motions to place Bill 257 as substituted in the various appointments to different boards and commissions and agencies.
on that motion, then without any objection, so ordered. I would like to ask if Speaker Ben, you can lead us in the prayer.
Panogi, por favor. Kirani Diyos Tata, lahinya dan Espiritu Santo. Amen. Diyos Tata, bendisiham za pegam guini gitano iguahan. Para todo iminaulik dan para ta gosa itano dan itautaw itano siya. Man agway za esti itautaw guahan todo iman oridinat guini natano dan iman bisita za man maadzik para esti lokwe na pro mapuksay siya familian niya. Ingagagaw na kontinua bumindisiham za giyaham, pior hamin igagi gwini ni unai oportunidad dan responsabilidad para binggiya este gobernamentong guahan para iminaulik todo itauto ni manggagi gwini gitano mo. And now ingagagaw za kontinua bumindisihami dan todo i-insesedbi gwini na tono. Ingagagaw eno ginini as lahimu Jesus na nas nananya as Maria. Sa namasi, ginani Tatay, lahinya, dan Espiritu Santo. Amen.
Can I ask Senator Tom Ada if you can lead us in the recitation of the Inifresi?
Inifresi. Ginini mas tatkilo gihinasoko, imas takkalum gikurasonho. Zani mas figo na ninasinaho, uufresin maisazo, para bahu protehi, zanhu defendi, ihinengi, ikutura, i lenguaje, i airi, i hanom, zanitano tomoro. Ni irin shakko diretso ginenas zuustata. Esti hua fitma gihilo i Biblia, zani banderaho i banderangwahan.
Senator Chris Duenas, if you can lead us in the singing of the Guam hymn, and Senator Sam Habini in the singing of the national anthem.
Panongi Samoru Purita Nota Zanritu Nanya Nitodu Iluga Para I honra, para I gloria, Abiba I isla sen para I honra, para I gloria, Abiba I isla sen para. I todo I tempo I paz para hita, zangin ni langit na bendisyon. Contra peligro na fansafuham, Zeus protege Guam. Contra peligro na fansafuham, Zeus protege Guam. By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the clerk to please take roll call.
Senator Tom Ada. Senator Tony Ada. Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Guthertz. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Wampet.
Present.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio, you're recognized for a call of approval of the Legislative Journal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But before that, may I move that we excuse the Vice Speaker Cruz, who's helped to facilitate this session, and also I move to excuse Senator Guthertz, who is also off island, and we would be hearing shortly from her written support for Bill 257 as substituted.
On that motion, without any objections, and so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that we approve the Legislative Journal dated 6/3/11, subject to corrections.
On that motion, without objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are communications and petitions, and I move that these be appended to today's session journal.
Without any objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, thank you. There are messages from Imagalahan Guahan, and I move for the same.
Without any objections, so ordered.
And there are reports of standing committees, and I move that these reports also be appended to today's session journal.
Without any objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Thank you. So introductions.
And so on item 12, I move that Bill number 228-31 COR to Bill number 277-31 COR be given its first reading.
On that motion, without any objections, so ordered.
And I move that resolution numbers 132-31 COR to resolution number 168-31 also be given its first reading.
Without any objections, so ordered.
And I move, Madam Speaker, that certificate numbers 32-31 COR to certificate number 68-31 also be given its first reading.
Without objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Under motions,
Please proceed.
my first motion is to place on the top of the second reading file Bill number 257-31 as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and further substitute on the floor, introduced by Senator Dennis G. Rodriguez, Jr. Madam Speaker, it's an act to appropriate funds for the operations of the Guam Department of Education for fiscal year ending September 30, 2012, and to provide for the efficient opening of all schools, including F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School, by providing financing for working capital expenditures for the 2011-2012 school year and for other purposes. I move that this be placed in the second reading file.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the following be placed in the legislative concurrence file. Madam Speaker, from the Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation, with the committee's recommendation to confirm, I move to place Ms. Evelyn Casil.
That motion, without any objections, so ordered.
And further on the legislative consent calendar, I move to place from the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, with Speaker Ben's recommendation to confirm Mr. William West Cassidy. I move that be placed.
Without any objections, so ordered.
From the same committee to the same Guam Banking and Insurance Board, on the appointment of Mr. Mark Fisher, with Speaker Pangalinan's committee's recommendation to confirm, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence.
No objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Elizabeth C. Gale to be a member of Parks and Recreation, from Senator Munya Barnes' Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation, with her committee's recommendation to confirm, I move that be placed in the legislative concurrence.
Without any
Calendar.
objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Mary Michelle Gibson Shelley to be a member of the Port Authority of Guam, with Senator Tom Addis, Committee on Utilities, Transportation, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs Committee's recommendation to confirm, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence file.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Rose Greeno to be a member of the the Board of Trustees from the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, from Senator Dennis Rodriguez's Committee on Health and Human Services, Senior Citizens, Economic Development, and Election Reform, I move that that be placed on the legislative concurrence with his committee's recommendation to do confirm.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Mr. Artemio B. Ilagan to be a commissioner for the Banking and Insurance Commission, with Speaker Ben Penglin's Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, with his committee's recommendation do confirm, I move this be placed in the legislative concurrence calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Attorney Vanessa Lee Borja G. to be a member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, from Senator Barnes's Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation, with that committee's recommendation do confirm. Madam Speaker, I move that this be placed in that calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Ms. Benita Manglotña, Atalik Manglotña, to be the Director of Department of Administration, from the Vice Speaker's Cruz's Committee on Youth, Cultural Affairs, Procurement, General Government Operations, and Public Broadcasting, with the recommendation do confirm, I move that that be placed in that consent, legislative concurrence.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Anne Marie T. Muña to serve as a member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, with Senator Barnes's Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation, I move that that be placed with the committee's recommendation to do confirm.
Without objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, thank you. On the appointment of Mr. Carl Penglinan to serve as administrator for the Guam Economic Development Authority, with Senator Speaker Ben's Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, that be. Wait, can I just get a clarification? This Senator Rodriguez or yours, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. This is not right. With Senator Dennis Rodriguez's committees, with the recommendation to confirm, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Mr. Frank C. Roberto to serve as Director of Agency for Human Resource Development, with my committee's recommendation to do confirm, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of John J. Rojas to serve as a member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, with Senator Barnes's Committee on Municipal Affairs, Tourism, Housing, and Recreation, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence calendar with a recommendation to do confirm.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Mr. Richard P. Sablan to serve as a member of the Board of Trustees, Guam Community College, from your committee, Madam Speaker, Committee on Education and Public Libraries, I move that be placed with the committee's recommendation to do confirm.
Without any objections, so ordered.
Also from your committee, on the appointment of Mr. Jesse T. Nicholas to serve as a member of the Guam Commission for Educator Certification, with your committee's recommendation to confirm, I move that be placed on the legislative concurrence
Without any
calendar.
objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Ms. former Senator Antoinette D. Sanford to serve as a member of Board of Regents, from your committee, I move that that be placed on the legislative concurrence calendar with your committee's recommendation to do confirm.
Without any objections, so ordered.
On the appointment of Mr. Craig R. Thompson to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, with Speaker Ben's Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, I move that that be placed in the consent legislative concurrence calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
And finally, Madam Speaker, on the appointment of Jesus Q. Torres to serve as a member of the Board of Directors for the A.B. Wampat International Airport, from Senator Tom Addis, Committee on Utilities, Transportation, Public Works, and Veterans Affairs, I move that be placed on the consent calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
And Madam Speaker, finally, from the committee from Speaker Ben's committee, on the appointment of Mr. Danilo M. Rapadas to serve as a member of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, I move that be placed with the committee's recommendation to do confirm on the consent calendar.
Without any objections, so ordered.
Thank you very much. My next motion, Madam Speaker, is to officially recognize the interns that we have had serving under your leadership here this past summer. Today, they're currently serving as pages here for this session rather. Mr. Joseph Bodie, 12th grade at St. John's School. I'd like that he be publicly recognized, together with Mr. Bing Wang, 12th grade from St. John's School, Steve Shin, 12th grade from St. John's School, and Miss Rachel Kim, 10th grader from St. John's School. And I also asked the body's permission to rebroadcast on our legislative channel a special presentation that they made before you and before the legislature on the China-Russia visa waiver program and the hopes and the struggles in order to attain that status.
Okay, thank you. Without any objections then to rebroadcast? Thank you very much. Without any objections, so ordered.
And maybe at this time we can all give them a big round of applause.
Okay.
Thank you. And finally, my last motion, Madam Speaker, is that any resolutions or certificates of condolence or congratulatory in nature that be automatically adopted with all the senators as co-sponsors, and that the sponsors of these documents work closely with the legal counsel and the clerk's office in the preparation of these certificates or resolutions.
Without any objections then, so ordered. On legislative concurrences?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, if you will permit me to just make a sweeping motion, that the motion that I just made to place all these items on the legislative concurrence, that we just move all of those nominees to the voting file.
On that motion, without any objection then, so ordered.
And finally, my last motion, Madam Speaker, is that we resolve into the Committee of the Whole with the Chairman of our Appropriations, Speaker Ben Penglinan, presiding, and to allow the Office of Finance and Budget to assist in that presentation of Bill 257 as substituted, and in order to permit Speaker Ben, his committee, and the Office of Finance and Budget some time to call the Department of Education officials or any other individual he wishes would be assisting in addressing this bill on the floor. I move that we recess after we resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
So on that motion then to resolve the Committee of the Whole and then having Speaker Penglinan then preside without any objections, so ordered.
Before the committee. I want to thank the Speaker and, of course, Senator Rodriguez and Senator, our Majority Leader, for facilitating, and, of course, Acting Speaker B.J. Cruz at that time for facilitating discussion on Bill 257. The original matter, of course, was regarding the F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School, and I think it is the desire of the body by its actions today that the committee as well as the body consider, given the timeframes involved and the urgency of the matter of all of the issues facing the Guam Department of Education, that we address the 2012 budget for the Guam Department of Education, inclusive of the needs today by the Guam Department of Education to resolve issues facing the opening of school matters. In addition to F.Q. Sanchez, the matter that are urgent to us, of course, are the overcrowding at GW, in which we saw the GW students rally to support additional requirements of the school, and the school administration presenting before the legislature and the Speaker requests for additional resources to facilitate the opening of the school this year, not only at GW, but as well as Agueda Johnston Middle School and Simon Sanchez High School, that needed immediate attention and resources in order to resolve matters that may prevent them from opening, as well as alleviate conditions that are being faced by the students in those schools as well. As we all know, the Department of Education begins its school year in August, but the fiscal year budget does not begin in October. And as such, sometimes they are faced with the challenges of opening the school in August, having the resources through the appropriation through the end of September, and not being sure what resources they have after September, 3 or 4 months after the school ends. Addressing this issue and this matter now presents us with an opportunity to provide greater stability and planning purposes and opportunity for the Guam Board of Education as well as the Guam Department of Education management to take a look at opening the school year and knowing exactly what they have to carry them into the next fiscal year and conclude the school year in July. And so in the discussion, as we proceeded with looking at the budget this year, we decided that with the urgency faced by the community of FQ Sanchez, GW, Agada, it presented us with this opportunity to resolve on a holistic basis the needs of the Guam Department of Education. I want to, before we begin discussion on the bill, provide just general guidelines. The committee as a whole gives an opportunity for members to have more free expression and exchange of information between the committee chair, the departments and agencies being affected by the matter before the committee of the whole, in this case the Department of Education. We will at this time have the Office of Finance and Budget, which prepared its recommendation for the funding level for the Guam Department of Education for the next fiscal year as well as needs for this fiscal year, make a presentation of the bill and the committee report that you have, so that as you proceed in your reading of the bill over the lunch period, which will take a break, we hope to provide you with the additional perspective and information that will help you facilitate your discussion and deliberation when we return and go through the bill. So at this time, I'd like to recognize and thank Mr. Chris Badassi, the Director of Office of Finance and Budget, Ms. Selena Onodera, who is here with us, Salas Onodera, who's also with the Office of Finance and Budget, and ask them to make the presentation for the bill itself and, of course, the committee report that outlines what is being presented to you in the bill. Yeah. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Badassi.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm going to attempt to do is just to kind of walk you through the committee report. So I'll be speaking to various parts of it, and you'll see different tables and exhibits up on the screen. And first, I want to just give a little background. On April 8th, we received Bill 145, which is the biennial budget request. And after having some time to go through that and scrutinize it, we determined that the Department of Education was approximately $10 million short compared to the funding levels from fiscal year 11. And that is, as I'll point out later on, inclusive of the Education Jobs Fund grant. And I'll get into the detail of that in a little bit. So again, I'm going to try to outline some important factors in the committee report related to the budget process, the significant figures that are relevant to how we determine the prioritization and the funding levels in Bill 257. Okay, the first exhibit here is just a general overview of Bill 145 and the current authorized expenditure levels for FY11. So on your left side, the blue bar represents the current funding level for FY 2011 for the Department of Education. The red bar represents the funding in Bill 145. So it's about approximately a $10 million difference between the two. On the right-hand side, the blue bar is still representing the Department of Education FY 2011 funding, and the red bar representing the OFB recommendation for the FY 12 funding, which is approximately $10 million more than the current funding levels. Okay. The first part of the committee report talks a little bit about the ERA appropriations or grants given to the territory in February 2009. Of that, the Guam Department of Education received about $75 million, and it was partialed into two different applications. There was a phase 1 and a phase 2. As some might recall, Bill 103 was introduced and then passed into Public Law 3140, and that was as a result of the department having difficulty in expending those ERA funds by the deadline of September 30th of this year. So approximately $60 million of the 75 was reprogrammed or put into personnel, and then the territory's been reimbursed under the agreement that the funding of the capital improvement projects for the schools will remain with that money. It will still be funded with that money. So there's about $15 million left of ERA money, some which has already been spent and some which still needs to be spent. And the committee encourages the DOE to try to obligate all the rest of those funds. And if any can help with the current budget, that would be good, and also with the FY12 budget. Now moving into the FY11 DOE appropriation levels, I want to kind of set the stage to understand how we get from the 195 level to the 205 level within the Bill 257. Now, the final appropriation was $175 million within the current Budget Act. And the reason that I'm using the 195 level is because there was a one-time Education Jobs Fund grant that came to the territory in August prior to coming into session for the budget last year. It was the result of the conclusion or recommendation of the committee and the OFB that the $20 million awarded for that, and the grant was only to be used for teachers' salaries. So rather than bring on a bunch of additional teachers that we wouldn't be able to fund once the one-time grant went away, it was a determination of the committee passed by the legislature and then signed into law by the governor that $20 million be reduced and supplanted with the ERA money. And so this year we have to make that up. And so kind of to try to keep it on par with the existing levels of recommended spending, we are adding back that $20 million difference. And you can see up on the screen there the 175 and how it bridges to the 195 level of appropriations. And the final determination of the 175 or the 195 with the Education Jobs Fund for FY11, that budget only included organic growth and payroll. And when we talk about organic growth and payroll, that would be funding the additional step increases from the previous year and any increments that would be awarded during the current fiscal year budget, or in this case, FY11. And it also includes the increases to the retirement fund for the unfunded actuarial accrued liability payments that are made for the DB portion, and also any changes in the life insurance, disability insurance, things of that nature. For fiscal 11, there was no increase to the power appropriation or the utilities appropriation due to the fact that during the fiscal year there was actually a significant LEAC decrease in this current fiscal year. The water was increased by approximately 8%, given that the levels of rate increases that were already approved by the PUC over a 4-year period. So now I'm going to kind of talk about the Bill 145 submission and how that compares to the current levels. And before that, I want to kind of walk you through some special items that appear or are added into the appropriation levels that you can see, and that's in Table 9. We can put Table 9 up. Okay. So there were 5 special items. And the reason that I'm doing this is within this report, we look at the actual expenditures of the department, and within that there was a lot of movement of appropriations this year. There was part of the retirement fund appropriation was de-appropriated and reappropriated to a non-DOE expenditure, and then there were some things that were appropriated back to DOE. So we had to go in and kind of reconcile what exactly is the right appropriation level for fiscal 11 that the department would need had none of those special items occurred. And the special items start on page 18 of the committee report. And the first one was the Hay Study salary increase. So the Hay Study was only funded for 1 quarter, October through January. The increase to the Department of Education was approximately $1.2 million that was paid out to employees. So for the purposes of looking at the authorized levels for fiscal 11 that we can compare to fiscal 12, we have to remove that $1.2 million because it's not an expenditure that the department is going to carry into the next budget cycle. So to kind of make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, we're going to remove that $1.2 million appropriation. As I mentioned earlier, the second special item was the education jobs funding of $20,146,000. That's added back into the annual appropriation or the local appropriation, which I had already talked about. The third special item was the de-appropriation of the retirement of $2.2 million of the retirement fund. So when we look at the final appropriation levels after all the amended laws that took place, we have to add that $2.2 million back in there so that the increase from 11 to 12 is from the 27.46 retirement level to the 28.3 rather than the 21.44 level to 28.3. So we add back the 2.2 to keep that on par. The fourth special item is the school lunch program. Now, when the Educational Financial Supervisory Commission measures DOE's current spending rates, it excludes the school lunch program. Bill 145 and also Public Law 196, the current Budget Act, include the revenues of the school lunch program. Those are actually federal funds that are reimbursed to the territory for free and reduced and regular price lunches for students in the school system. In addition to that, there's an appropriation and a recognition of the cash collected for that program. So neither of those things come out of general fund or any particular special funds in the budget, but we do want to add it back in so that it's still an apples to apples comparison, since Bill 145 also includes the school lunch program and also the current Budget Act. So we're adding that in. And the last one is the appropriation. In the current budget, it's $7.3 million approximately for the federal funds, and it looks like the school cash collections are going to come in around $815,000 for a total of $8.1 million. And the last special item on the appropriation is the Guam Power Authority promissory note. That is an appropriation that is made to the Department of Administration, and the payment is made directly to GPA. It's a $200,000 a month agreement that the department pays for prior power bills that weren't paid. And that is added back in because the Education Supervisory Commission doesn't recognize that as a DOE appropriation since it goes to the Department of Administration. So when we add back in all these special items and take out the ones that shouldn't be there to look at how to compare the current budget to the future budget, the total appropriation level is $205,366,000. And what I'm going to refer to this as for the rest of the discussion is the FY 2011 adjusted authorized level, because it may not match up exactly with the what you're going to see in the EFSC reports that I'm about to present. So the Education Financial Supervisory Commission was put together by a bill last year that was passed into law in June 29th, it was in July of 2011. And what the Education Financial Supervisory Commission does is it's comprised of the chairman, which is the BBMR director, the Office of Finance and Budget Director, the Public Auditor, the Director of the Department of Administration, and there's a fifth member who has yet to be appointed that is a parent of a student in the school system. And then there's ex officio members, the Superintendent of Education and her deputy, or the Deputy Superintendent of Finance. So this group meets at a minimum on a monthly basis, and what we do is we review the appropriation levels to the actual spending rates that the department is realizing compared to their appropriations. And the process that has evolved, because this was a new commission that was just put in place, is there's a budget status report that's developed, and that report is developed by DOE sending us on the 15th of each month their general ledger accounting information after they close their books for the previous month. So the last meeting occurred on July 29th. So the data that was reported to us for the July 29th meeting is 9 months of actual expenditures and 3 months of projected expenditures. In addition to the general ledger accounts, we actually get the detailed payroll register information, so we can actually dive a little deeper into the trends within the DOE payroll. And there's a list of reports of those different reports. Can you put that list up? So so these are the 8 different reports that we measure, and most of them are, of course, involve what fund do these, is the payroll funded out of? And then there's a second report that looks at the pay period frequency. You've got some employees that are on a 21 pay period schedule and some that are on a 26 pay period schedule. There's also, looks at things by object class, so it looks at it by salaries versus benefits, and also by payroll category. So there's actual payroll categories, so we can actually look at different types of expenditures. We'll go ahead and show an example of one of the reports here for you, so you can get a feel for what it looks like. So that right there is 19 pay periods complete for the year of actual payroll data from the department. Can you blow it up a little bit? And so you can see the categories of funding that go across for the pay periods. For your 21 pay period employees, they're funded out of, can you show me the left side there? The general fund shows you who's funded from the formula grants, the ERA grants, and then of course the education jobs fund. And then for the 26 pay period employees, it shows you the different funds as well. Now it's important that we look at this by the frequency of their pay periods, because obviously the trend or the spend rate is much different when we hit the summer, because the 21 pay period employees don't collect a paycheck during June, July, and August. So when we look at and that's why we actually had to get the payroll register data as opposed to just looking at the general ledger, because this allows us to break those apart and properly trend the payroll data for the entire year. Now these reports, they allow the commission to really scrutinize, how the Department of Education is spending their money allocated for payroll. So it's real easy for the group to see, are they increasing FTEs, are they staying steady? And for the most part, the trend has been steady. There has been some hiring throughout the year, but most of that hiring has been occurring on the federal funded side, so either as a part of the formula grant or ERA funds. Now, when we, now just to give a little bit more background on how we got to where we are today. There was as soon as we got the budget in April 28th and noticed that there was a $10 million gap for DOE, a letter was sent to the administration on Bill 145, kind of requesting that maybe the administration should revisit and maybe realign the bill to at least fund the current level of operations. After not receiving a response, a letter was sent to the chairman of the GEB on June 29th, requesting that the GEB meet with the administration, which actually did occur after a response from the chairman on July 5th. And then during that same period, several people met with the chairman of the Committee on Education on July 5th and 6th to try to resolve these issues. And what we were trying to resolve was the 195 level of funding to the current level of whatever that required level is. And when the Department of Education submitted their first budget, can you show that table? On, I believe it was April 8th. This is, it's the DOE table that shows Table 5. Sorry. So Table 5 shows the different requests submitted by the Department of Education during this budget cycle. On April 26th, the first submission to the legislature was $261.8 million. There was a revised submission on May 7th that went up to $266 million. And then at the public hearing on July 25th, and this was after the different communication took place between the administration, the board, and the Department of Administration, and the Committee on Education, the DOE request was reduced down to $234 million. So that's where we're at today, and the committee has struggled to try to still bridge that gap between the 195 level and the 234 level. And that's why we placed a heavy amount of reliance on these reports that are submitted to the Education Financial Supervisory Commission, because they are a real-time snapshot of where the department is today and how much they're spending. And so on tables, let me get to that table. Table 8 shows you the results of the last meeting as far as where the department is tracking as of today. So with all the changes that I had talked about earlier that had to be reconciled, the local appropriation, excluding the school lunch program and all those other special items, the appropriation levels that the EFSC is tracking is the $173 million you see on the left-hand side. This middle column is the actual data, which is 19 pay periods actual and 9 months actual for the non-payroll items. So basically actuals through the month of June. And then what you see on the right-hand side is the projected lapse or the projected shortfall by object categories. And you can see the department has got about a $5 million shortfall in the payroll category. And they're showing several lapses below the payroll line. Now, a couple of notes on this. Throughout the year, as we've gone through month by month, looking at the department's financials, early on it was agreed that about $3.6 million of that projected shortfall in payroll was due to the health insurance. And that's part of the reason for it. And then the other part has to do with just an underfunding from the original bill in those object categories. Now, this information can be a little bit deceiving, and we're trying to, because this is the first cycle of looking at DOE's budget, everybody's not completely convinced that they're going to lapse $8 million below the payroll line. There could be issues with the timing of the processing of invoices. There could be timing issues with procurement and getting POs filled and things of that nature. In addition, on the miscellaneous object category 290, that includes a $2 million appropriation for textbooks, which as of July 29th, the department had only received $100,000 of that $2 million. So those are the types of things that have to be considered if they're really lapsing the 7.9, or if some of that money is actually going to be obligated by the end of the year. So, ideally it looks like they're fully funded, and if given the authority to move expenditures into payroll from those other object categories, they would be covered for this year. Now, the current budget does not allow for that. So included in Bill 257 are some authorizations to allow them to cover that payroll with other object category appropriations. Okay. So from here, I'm going to talk about the recommendation of the OFB and the committee. This would be, can you put up page 20 on the committee report? Now, having talked about all the special items and made all the special adjustments, you can see that's how we got from the 173 appropriation level that the EFSC looked at to the 205 level, which I'm calling the fiscal year 2011 adjusted authorized level. And this is table 5, page 20. One more. No, up. It's not up there. Wait. Can you blow it up? Okay. So we know that they're currently authorized at $205 million. The committee is recommending $216 million. Now, this is inclusive of a school lunch program of $11 million. So if you take the $11 million off of the 216 level, the local funding that we're recommending is $205 million, compared to the 195 of the current appropriation level, or in Bill 145, it's a $10 million difference. And you can see, Selena, this is the one I'm trying to get to. And I'm going to show you exactly where those are coming from. Put it up on the screen. It's not in the executive summary. Okay, I'm sorry, we don't seem to have that to put up on the screen, but if you look at page 20, I believe, of your committee report, the items that are driving the increase are itemized on that page, and the first one is the salary step increases for fiscal 12, and that amount is $1.58 million. The increase in the retirement fund accrued liability and the disability insurance also increased. That amount was up $1.7 million. We accounted for an increase in the power costs of $3.2 million, and that basically is by taking their previous 12 months of experience, trending that data to include the just recently approved LEAC adjustment, and that's all that's in there. So, and that accounted for $3.2 million of the $10 million increase. And then $3 million of the increase is actually from the school lunch program. And that's not local funding, so it's really doesn't, it's included on the expenditure side, and it's also included on the revenue side. And the increase is due to the recent contract where the department has said that the vendor believes they can increase participation by up to 80% in the high schools and up to 50% in the middle schools. We adjusted that down to a 25% increase across the board, and when we did that, the federal reimbursements realized we believe this year will be a little bit over 10 million. So you're going to see an increase from 7.3 million to 10 from the federal side, and then the school lunch cost increased from $2 to $2.50 starting at the beginning of the school year, and we believe that that's going to account for an increase from about $815,000 to a little bit over $1 million. And so that's your $3 million of the school lunch. So the total increase is about, from those items, is $9.4 million. Like I said, the gap is 195 in Bill 145 to the 205 locally funded level, and that's pretty much what drives that increase. And then the last item to talk about is the $525,000 appropriation in Bill 257 to account for some of the issues that we've heard about over the summer with George Washington High School, Simon Sanchez High School, and a couple of the middle schools. So in the Public Law 31-74, the Supplemental Appropriations Act, there was an appropriation made from the pilot revenues that were to be collected. I think Senator Ramsey has a question. And of that it was $2.625 million that was approved by a resolution by the CCU for the back billing of the pilot revenues to GPA. In Bill 3174, we only appropriated $2.1 million of that 2.65, leaving a balance of about $525,000 available from Bill, that becomes available should those revenues be realized. And so what this does is it makes an appropriation of $525,000 for the different schools. Part of that goes to GW, I think $300,000, and then various numbers that we receive from the Department of Education to deal with the different things of fixing the schools and providing collateral equipment and other items. And that concludes the presentation at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badassi. At this time, what we'll do is then have maybe some general questions that you may have, and then once we kind of answer those, we could break for lunch. You can review the bill and some of the information presented, and then we'll reconvene in which we'll begin the discussion on the bill. I have Senator Ada first. Okay, that's fine with me, unless Senator Yamashita?
Speaker Ben, just a general statement.
Sure.
The substituted bill
Right.
is not on the website. So
Oh,
people
okay.
are looking at a,
As substituted by
Earlier,
committee and
yes.
not as further substituted on the floor?
Yes.
All right, so we'll make sure we post that up as soon as we break from here. The bill that we will be discussing is the bill that was moved on the session floor to adopt and is now in the committee as a whole. And the title on that is Bill Number 257-31 COR, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Public Debt, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and further substituted on the floor. So that's the version that is before this body at this time. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and break for lunch, and we'll return at 2 o'clock. Is that gives sufficient time to everyone? So the committee on the whole will be in recess and reconvene at 2 p.m. Thank you, and Sidus Masi.